The alpha wanted her on her knees to prove she was nothing, but the instant she knelt, the entire hall felt it. The air thickened, wolves froze, and Kayla Drazeth realized too late that he hadn't claimed her. He'd awakened her. The torches in Iron Hollow's great hall burned too bright for midnight, casting shadows that moved like wolves across stone older than memory. Aelthra Vereen knelt barefoot on the floor she'd been scrubbing for 3 hours, her fingers raw from lye soap and cold water. The dark gown she wore, borrowed without permission from Abita's quarters, clung to her shoulders, still damp from where a soldier had accidentally kicked her bucket over. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My mother once said I'd never reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this, the quiet ones, the forbidden ones, the ones that burn slowly in the dark, deserve to be heard. Subscribe to Midnight Stories and help turn whispered tales into something that can't be ignored. Comment below what time and where you are watching from now. Let's continue. Hollowborn, one of them muttered as he passed, loud enough for the entire hall to hear. Laughter rippled through the ranks. 23 winters and still crawling on all fours like a pup. She didn't look up. That was the first rule of survival in the Dominion. Don't look up. Other Omegas scattered like smoke when the soldiers moved through, their eyes fixed on the ground, their wolves silent and subdued. Aelthra had learned their language, the flinch that meant danger, the stillness that meant disappear. In a pack where your wolf defined your worth, being the only Omega who had never shifted made you less than nothing. It made you Hollowborn. Her pale hair, the colour of winter moonlight, fell forward as she scrubbed, hiding the calm that unsettled them more than tears ever could. She had discovered something the others hadn't. Silence could be a fortress. Submission could be a mask. But masks only worked when no one was watching too closely. Alpha Kaelor Drazeth stood in the archway where firelight couldn't quite reach him, his arms crossed over a chest built for war. He had been watching her for 20 minutes, not intervening, not commanding the soldiers to stop, just watching. His attention felt like teeth against her spine. She could feel the weight of his gaze the way prey feels the pause before the strike, not violent yet, but inevitable. He was the Dominion's supreme enforcer, the wolf who made even other alphas bare their throats. Everything about him was control. The way he moved, the way he spoke, the way he looked at things he wanted. And lately, he looked at her. In hierarchies built on dominance, her mother had whispered once before they took her away. Autonomy isn't stolen in one moment. It's eroded, touch by touch, look by look, until you forget you ever owned yourself. Aelthra's hands stilled on the stone, the hall doors slammed open. Elder Morvek's voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk. By order of the High Circle, all wolves are summoned to the midnight conclave. The moon demands witness. The soldiers straightened. The Omegas trembled. Aelthra rose slowly to her feet, water dripping from her fingertips onto stone that had drunk the blood of 1,000 defeated wolves. Something shifted in her chest. Not her wolf, but something older, heavier, like a door sealed for centuries, suddenly straining against its hinges. She turned her head just slightly, and for half a heartbeat, her eyes met Kaelor's across the firelit distance. His wolf stirred. She could see it in the way his jaw tightened. Something old was listening. Kaelor Drazeth had killed his first rival at 16, claimed his first territory at 19, and never once questioned the order of things. Alphas ruled. Omegas submitted. The strong protected the weak, whether the weak wanted it or not. It was natural. So why did the Hollowborn Omega make his wolf pace like a caged thing? He'd been watching Aelthra Vereen for weeks now, studying the way she moved through the Dominion like water through stone, never fighting the current but never truly yielding either. She should have been broken by now. 23 winters without a wolf in a pack that worshipped strength should have shattered her into something manageable, something grateful. Instead, she had that unnerving calm, that silent defiance wrapped in submission's clothing. She needs structure, he told himself as he followed her through the moonlit courtyard after the hall had emptied. Someone to show her where she belongs. Aelthra. Her name in his mouth felt like ownership. She stopped walking but didn't turn around. Even that small rebellion made something dark coil in his chest, half anger, half something he refused to name. He moved deliberately into her path, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Close enough that his sighs became a statement. I could crush you, but I'm choosing restraint. Be grateful. You're summoned to the conclave, he said, though she already knew. You'll stand with the other Omegas, behind the betas. You understand? Yes, Alpha. Her voice was steady. Too steady. His wolf snarled at the absence of fear. Look at me when I'm speaking to you. She did, and for 3 heartbeats, Kaelor forgot how to breathe. Her eyes weren't the pale, washed-out blue of most Omegas. They were storm grey, the colour of iron and winter skies, and they held something he'd never seen in an Omega before. Evaluation. She was looking at him the way he looked at territory he hadn't yet claimed. Attraction is recognition, his father had taught him. Possession is protection. An alpha takes what needs taking before someone weaker ruins it. You should be careful, he said quietly, and was startled to realize he meant it. There are wolves in this pack who would hurt you just to test if you'd bleed. I know, Aelthra said. I scrub their floors every night. The words landed like a blade between ribs, not accusatory, just true. Behind them, voices drifted from the warrior quarters. Kaelor caught fragments. Thinks he'll claim her. Hollowborn trash. Never seen him circle anyone like that. The rumors were spreading. Good. That would make this easier. He leaned closer, close enough that she'd feel the heat of him, the weight of what he was. You think you're surviving, Omega. But survival isn't the same as living. When you finally understand that, I'll be waiting. She said nothing, but he watched her throat work as she swallowed, watched the pulse jump beneath pale skin. The conclave bells began to toll. Kaelor straightened, letting his alpha presence flood the space between them, the invisible pressure that made lesser wolves submit, without conscious thought. The courtyard had filled with pack members moving toward the great circle, all of them watching now. Perfect. He let his voice carry, let every wolf within 50 feet hear the command that would make his intentions unmistakable. Kneel. The midnight conclave gathered in the ancient stone circle where Iron Hollow's founders had once made blood oaths beneath winter moons. Torches burned in iron brackets, casting everything in shades of amber and shadow. 300 wolves formed concentric rings, alphas closest to the center, then betas, then omegas pressed against the outer edge like an afterthought. The air tasted of smoke and dominance, thick enough to choke on. Aelthra stood where Kaelor had left her, alone in the space between the courtyard and the circle, visible to everyone, belonging to no one. She hasn't knelt yet, someone whispered, the words slithering through the crowd like poison. Kaelor emerged from the alpha ring, his movements deliberate, theatrical. He was performing now, not for her but for the pack. This is what happens, his body language screamed, when you forget your place. I gave you a command, Omega. His voice rolled across the circle like thunder. Or do you think yourself above pack law? Aelthra's hands trembled at her sides, not from fear, though fear was there, cold and sharp, but from something else, something that had been building since the Great Hall, since his eyes first claimed her as territory to conquer. Public humiliation isn't about punishment, her mother's voice echoed from memory. It's about teaching everyone else what happens when you resist. They break you in front of witnesses so the witnesses learn to break themselves. Kneel, Kaelor repeated, and this time his alpha command crashed through the circle like a physical force. Every Omega dropped instantly, their wolves crushed beneath the weight of his dominance. Betas swayed. Even some younger alphas bared their throats instinctively. Aelthra's knees buckled. She caught herself on shaking hands, her palms scraping against frozen earth as 300 wolves watched her fold. The position was designed for maximum degradation. Head down, spine curved, utterly vulnerable. Laughter rippled through the soldier ranks. Hollowborn knows her place after all. Should have knelt the first time. Thinks an alpha like Drazeth would actually claim that. The elders said nothing. They never did. Silence was complicity dressed in wisdom's robes. Kaelor circled her slowly, and Elthra felt something inside her chest, something she'd kept locked and quiet for 23 years, begin to crack. Heat bloomed beneath her skin, searingly hot, like fever or fury or something with no name. Pressure built behind her eyes, in her throat, in the space between her ribs where her missing wolf should have lived. Trauma, the healers called it when Omegas broke during dominance displays. Natural, the Alphas called it when their commands shattered minds along with spirits. But this didn't feel like breaking. It felt like waking. Kaelor stopped in front of her, satisfaction rolling off him in waves. He believed he'd won, believed he'd just secured his claim in front of the entire pack, that she'd be grateful now, compliant, ready to accept his protection, because what choice did a hollowborn Omega have? Rise, he said, softer now, extending his hand like a merciful king. You've learned your lesson. Aelthra's fingers dug into the frozen earth. The heat beneath her skin became an inferno. The pressure behind her eyes became a roar she couldn't hear but felt, ancient and absolute and done with chains. She lifted her head. Across the circle, every torch flickered in perfect unison. There was no wind. The flames bent toward her like flowers turning toward the sun, and in the sudden suffocating silence, Aelthra felt something vast and silver stir in the marrow of her bones. Something old had finished listening. Now it was standing up. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Aelthra remained on her knees in the center of the torch circle, her head bowed, her pale hair curtaining her face. The court held its collective breath, waiting for the hollowborn Omega to finally break. Kaelor felt victory settle into his bones like certainty. Then she began to rise, not scrambling, not defeated. She rose the way dawn rises, inevitable, unhurried, utterly indifferent to whether anyone wanted it or not. She was still human, still barefoot in her borrowed dark gown, still that maddening picture of composure that had haunted him for weeks. But the air had changed. The torches guttered and flared. Every wolf in the circle felt it simultaneously, that primal instinct buried beneath civilization and hierarchy, the one that whispered danger in a language older than words. Behind Aelthra, the shadows moved. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. The darkness itself condensed and took shape, rising, until it towered above her human form. The silver wolf manifested like a nightmare given flesh and moonlight. It was massive, not the size of a typical alpha, but something from the old stories, from the time before packs had names and laws. Its fur gleamed like starlight on steel, its eyes burned with an intelligence that made Kaelor's wolf whimper and press low in his chest. It didn't snarl. It didn't attack. It simply stood behind her, and the entire world reorganized itself around that presence. The soldiers dropped. Not because anyone commanded it, not because fear overrode thought. They dropped because their wolves recognized something their human minds couldn't name: sovereignty. True authority wasn't taken. It wasn't enforced. It was recognized, the way you recognized the sky above you or the ground beneath your feet. Elder Morvek's staff clattered to the stone. He fell to one knee, his ancient wolf surrendering before his mind could catch up. One by one, the betas knelt. The Omegas, the enforcers. Kaelor's wolf, the same wolf that had never submitted, never yielded, never known anything but dominance, bowed its head inside his chest. His human pride fought it. He locked his knees, fisted his hands, growled low in defiance, but his wolf wasn't asking permission. His wolf had already made the choice, and the force of that submission brought him down. First to one knee, then both, his head bowing against every screaming instinct he possessed. This isn't possible, he thought desperately. She's hollowborn. She's nothing. She's... Aelthra turned her head slightly and her storm-grey eyes met his across the kneeling court. She still hadn't spoken. She didn't need to. The silver wolf behind her tilted its massive head, and the movement was almost gentle, the way a mountain might acknowledge the existence of a pebble at its base. Then the wolf's eyes began to glow, not with reflected firelight, but with something colder, something that had been sleeping in Aelthra Verine's bones since before Iron Hollow Dominion had carved its first territory from the wilderness. The stone beneath them hummed. The torches went out, and in the darkness, Elder Morveck's voice cracked like breaking ice. The ancient laws, they're waking. The torches reignited all at once, but the light felt different now, colder, older, as if the flames remembered what the wolves had forgotten. Elder Morveck staggered to his feet, his hands shaking as he clutched the ancient leather tome that hadn't been opened in 3 generations. The other elders scrambled toward him, their earlier composure shattered like glass. "It's not possible," Elder Sivra hissed, her eyes wild. "The sovereign lines died out. We made sure—" She caught herself, but too late. Aelthra's head turned toward the elders with predatory slowness. The silver wolf behind her didn't move, but its presence made the air thick enough to choke on. "You made sure?" Aelthra's voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. "What did you make sure of, Elder?" Morveck's throat worked. The Sovereign Statute, Article 9 of the First Laws. His fingers trembled as he found the page, written in ink that had gone brown with age. No wolf bearing the sovereign mark may be claimed, commanded, or bound by pack law. They answer only to— "This is insane," Kalor interrupted, forcing himself upright despite his wolf's continued submission. "She's hollowborn. She never shifted. There's been a mistake." "Not hollowborn," Elder Sivra whispered, and something like guilt flickered across her weathered face. "Sealed. Your mother came to us when you were 3 winters old, Aelthra. She begged us to bind your wolf before anyone else sensed what you were." The silver wolf's growl was subsonic, felt rather than heard. Several soldiers whimpered. Aelthra stood perfectly still, but her hands had curled into fists at her sides. "You sealed me? Made me believe I was broken for 20 years because sovereign wolves threaten everything," Morveck said bluntly. "Pack structure, alpha authority, the entire hierarchy we've built. Your kind doesn't submit, can't be forced, can't be controlled." He looked at Kalor meaningfully. "Can't be claimed." Systems of power don't just exploit the vulnerable, Aelthra realized with sudden crystalline clarity. They actively suppress anyone who might expose that power as arbitrary. Kalor moved forward, and his voice carried the full weight of his alpha command. "I don't care what your dusty books say. She's lived as an omega in my pack for 23 years. That makes her nothing," Aelthra finished for him and watched him flinch. "It makes me nothing to you. It never gave you ownership, Kayla. It never gave you rights. I protected you. You circled me like prey." The distinction landed like a blade. Several of the younger wolves shifted uncomfortably, suddenly seeing their alpha's courtship through a different lens. Attraction without consent isn't romance. Possession isn't protection. And power that requires another person's submission isn't power at all. It's theft. Kayla's face darkened. "You think you can stand there with your ancient wolf and rewrite pack law? I am the alpha of Iron Hollow. I have bled for this dominion. You have nothing she didn't allow you to believe you had," Morveck interrupted wearily. "The moment a sovereign manifests, pack hierarchy becomes optional." The court fractured in real time. Some wolves looked at Aelthra with awe, others with fear, a few, mostly younger omegas, with something that looked dangerously like hope. But it was Kalor's second. A scarred alpha named Torin, who stepped forward from the shadows. "I invoke the right of challenge," he said quietly, his eyes locked on Elthra. "If she claims sovereignty over Iron Hollow, let her prove it. Dawn combat, no interference." Kaelor spun toward him. "Torin, what are you—" "Saving the pack," Torin said, "before we all kneel to something we don't understand." The silver wolf finally moved, lowering its massive head until it was level with Elthra's shoulder. She reached up slowly, her fingers disappearing into moonlit fur. "Accepted," she said. The heat came 3 nights after the revelation. Elthra felt it rising like fever beneath her skin. The Omega biology she'd never experienced, the vulnerability every unmated wolf feared. In any other pack, it would have meant confinement, protection, alphas circling like sharks, scenting blood. But her silver wolf stood sentinel in her mind, ancient and unmoved, and Elthra remained lucid. That was the first impossibility. The second was that she walked through the Dominion's central square at midnight, alone, while her scent rolled through the compound like a storm. Kaelor found her by the empty training grounds, and whatever remained of his control shattered. "You shouldn't be out here." His voice was barely human, roughened by instinct. His wolf clawed at his mind, torn between submission to her sovereign presence and the biological imperative screaming through his blood. "You don't understand what you're doing to you?" Elthra turned to face him fully. Even now, heat-flushed and trembling, her posture held that unnerving calm. "I'm not doing anything to you, Kaelor. Your wolf is doing this to itself." He moved without thinking. Pure alpha dominance, the kind that had always worked before. He closed the distance between them using his size, his strength, the weight of what he was to cage her against the stone wall. "You need—" The words caught in his throat. "You need me. You need protection. You need someone to make choices because you can't be trusted with your own body." But his wolf had already bowed. His wolf had already chosen. And the contradiction was tearing him apart. "Submit," he growled, but the command fractured halfway through. His hand rose to cup her face, half claiming, half pleading, and the moment his skin touched hers, his wolf whimpered. It was the sound of absolute surrender. Aelthra's eyes widened, not with fear but with sudden crystalline understanding. She'd felt his wolf submit before in the torch circle, but this was different. This was intimate. This was his wolf choosing her even as his human pride tried to cage and claim her. Desire without consent, her mother's voice whispered from memory, becomes self-destruction. It turns inward. It devours. Kaelor's hand dropped. He staggered back, his breathing ragged, his eyes wild. No. No, this isn't. But it was. Every instinct that had made him dominant, every drive that had given him power, now betrayed him. His wolf wanted to serve. His wolf wanted to kneel. And the human part of him that equated control with identity was crumbling like frost in sunlight. "You did this," he said, and it sounded like an accusation, but his voice broke on the last word. "You made me. I didn't make you anything." Aelthra's voice was steady, despite the heat singing through her veins. "You made yourself. Every choice, every command, every time you confused protection with ownership. Your wolf knows the difference now. The question is, do you?" Around them, the compound had gone silent. Wolves watched from windows, from doorways, witnessing the impossible, an alpha unmade not by violence but by the weight of his own desire, meeting something it couldn't possess. Kaelor fell to his knees, not commanded, not forced, just broken open. Elder Morvek's voice carried across the square, ancient and absolute. By the laws written in bone and silver, when an alpha cannot master his own wolf in the presence of sovereignty, a choice must be made. Elthra's heart hammered against her ribs. She had a choice. She'd always had a choice. She'd just never had the power to claim it until now. The trial of sovereignty is declared. Dawn, the old circle, Let the moon bear witness. Dawn broke over the old circle like a blade splitting stone. The trial of sovereignty hadn't been invoked in 3 generations. Elder Morveck stood at the circle's edge, his voice carrying the weight of centuries as he recited laws most wolves had forgotten existed. When a sovereign wolf emerges, unclaimed and unbound, the pack must choose, acknowledge the sovereignty, or challenge it. The challenged may name a champion to fight in their stead, or stand alone. Kaelor stood across from Aelthra, and for the first time since she'd known him, he looked uncertain. His wolf was still in turmoil, caught between submission and the desperate need to prove he hadn't been wrong about everything. "I'll stand as your champion." The words came from Davrek, a young alpha who'd never mocked her, who'd sometimes left bread near her washing bucket when no one was watching. "You shouldn't have to—" "No." Aelthra's voice was quiet, but it silenced the murmuring crowd instantly. "No champion, no protector, no one standing between me and the choice that belongs to me." Davrek's face showed genuine concern. "Aelthra, the trial laws allow for combat. Kaelor is— he's the strongest enforcer in the Dominion. Even with your wolf, in human form you— I know what I am." She stepped into the center of the circle, barefoot on earth that had absorbed the blood of countless challengers. "And I know what I'm not. I'm not someone who needs another person to validate my right to exist. Self-representation," her mother had whispered once, "is the most radical form of power. When you speak for yourself, you refuse the fundamental bargain of oppression, safety, in exchange for silence." Kaelor's jaw tightened. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. I could claim you by right of strength, protect you from wolves who would— wolves like you?" The question hung in the dawn air like smoke. Aelthra took 3 steps forward and her silver wolf rose behind her. Not fully manifest, just a shimmer of presence, a reminder of what slept in her bones. "You wanted me to kneel because you confused submission with safety. You wanted to own me because you confused possession with care. Your wolf knows better now. The question is, do you?" She could have destroyed him. One word to her wolf, one demonstration of the power that had brought an entire court to its knees, and Kaelor Drazeth would be nothing. Instead, she did something far more devastating. She looked at him with pity. "I don't need to prove I'm stronger than you, Kaelor. I need to prove I'm stronger than the part of me that believed I needed your approval to matter." She turned slowly, addressing the entire assembly. "That's what sovereignty is. Not dominance, not control. It's the absolute certainty that your worth isn't up for negotiation." Elder Morveck stepped into the circle, his ancient eyes bright with something like hope. "The trial laws require a demonstration. Sovereign wolves must prove they can hold territory, command loyalty, maintain order without brutality," Aelthra finished. "Without fear, without making everyone around them smaller so they can feel large." She stood alone in the center of the circle, human, barefoot, wearing nothing but her borrowed dark gown and the absolute conviction that she belonged to herself. Her silver wolf hummed approval in her chest. The wind stilled, the dawn held its breath, and every wolf in the circle, Alpha, Beta, Omega, felt the answer rise in their bones like recognition. She had already won. Kaelor's head bowed. Not his wolf this time, him. Elder Morveck's staff touched stone 3 times. The sovereignty is acknowledged, the trial is complete. The old wolf's voice dropped to something that sounded almost like reverence. "The court awaits your command, Sovereign Aelthra." The court waited. 50 wolves, perhaps more, stood in the old circle as the sun climbed higher. Alphas who had never bowed to anyone but their own ambition. Betas who had survived by reading power and aligning with it. Omegas who had learned that invisibility was the only armor that worked. All of them waiting for Aelthra Virine to speak. She could feel the weight of their expectation, the assumption that power, once claimed, must immediately be used. That sovereignty meant commands, restructuring, punishments for those who had wronged her. Kaelor still knelt at the circle's edge, his head bowed, waiting for judgment, waiting to be made an example. The soldiers who had mocked her stood rigid, anticipating retribution. Leadership, her mother's voice whispered, is not about making people fear what you'll do to them. It's about making them believe in what they could become. Aelthra looked at each of them, really looked, the way she'd learned to see in all those nights scrubbing floors while they pretended she didn't exist. She saw their fear, their confusion, the way they'd been taught that power only came in one shape: domination. She took a breath that tasted like dawn and freedom and spoke a single word: rise. The simplicity of it shattered something, not a command to kneel, not a demand for submission, not retribution or restructuring or any of the 1,000 ways she could have used this moment to prove her dominance. Just rise. The alphas stood slowly, confusion written across their faces. They had knelt voluntarily, expecting to be kept there, expecting power to look like it always had. Kayla's head lifted. His eyes met hers across the circle, and she saw the exact moment he understood. She wasn't going to destroy him. She wasn't going to punish him. She was going to do something far more transformative. She was going to make him irrelevant. The Iron Hollow Dominion was built on a hierarchy that told us worth was something you took from others, Aelthra said quietly. That to be strong, someone else had to be weak. That to matter, you had to make others kneel. Her silver wolf shimmered behind her, massive and patient. I'm not interested in that kind of power. Elder Morvek's breath caught. Several of the older wolves looked at each other, something like recognition passing between them, as if they remembered distantly a time before dominance became doctrine. From this moment, no wolf in this pack will kneel unless they choose to. No Omega will be named hollowborn. No strength will be measured by how much you can take from others. She turned slowly, meeting every gaze. We will build something different here. Not by force, by choice. One of the soldiers, the same one who had kicked her bucket over, stepped forward hesitantly. And if we choose to leave, then leave with my blessing. Aelthra's voice held no anger. I'm not here to cage anyone. I'm here to show you what we could be if we stopped treating each other like territory to claim. The alpha who had offered to champion her, Davrek, knelt voluntarily this time, his fist over his heart. Not submission, allegiance. I choose this, he said simply. Then another wolf knelt, and another. Not because they had to, because something in them recognized the difference between a leader and a master, between authority earned and dominance enforced. Even the Omegas, who had spent years learning to disappear, lifted their heads and chose. Kaelor stood alone now, neither kneeling nor standing with those who had chosen her vision. Just standing, diminished not by punishment but by irrelevance. He had wanted to matter to her, and now he simply didn't. Aelthra turned away from him without another word, and that dismissal was more devastating than any sentence she could have pronounced. Elder Morvek's voice trembled as he spoke the old words. The sovereignty is sealed. Let the night bear witness. As if in answer, the sky darkened impossibly, the sun still high but shadows deepening across the circle like a blessing. The night accepts her. Dawn came differently now. The same sun rose over Iron Hollow Dominion, but the air tasted like possibility instead of ash. 3 weeks had passed since the trial of sovereignty, and the compound had begun the slow work of becoming something it had never been, a pack built on choice rather than conquest. Aelthra walked through the courtyard barefoot, just as she had that first night, but everything had changed. The Omegas no longer scattered when she approached. They met her eyes, spoke their thoughts, moved through the world as if they had a right to space. The soldiers who once mocked her now trained alongside wolves they'd once dismissed. Not because she commanded it, but because dominance without purpose felt hollow once you'd seen another way. Her silver wolf walked beside her sometimes now, no longer hidden, no longer sealed, just present. A reminder that power didn't have to destroy to exist. She found Kaylor by the southern gate at sunrise, a travel pack slung over his shoulder. He looked smaller somehow, though his physical form hadn't changed. It was the absence of certainty that diminished him, the loss of the framework that had told him exactly who he was and what he deserved. "I'm leaving," he said without preamble. No explanation. No request for permission. Aelthra nodded. "Where will you go?" "Somewhere I can figure out the difference between strength and violence." His voice was rough with something that might have been shame or might have been the beginning of wisdom. "You were right. My wolf knew. I just couldn't hear it over my own noise." She didn't offer forgiveness. That wasn't hers to give. But she offered something more valuable. "You can choose differently now. That's not nothing." He met her eyes one last time, not with desire, not with possession, but with recognition. "You were never what I thought you were." "No," Aelthra agreed. "I was always exactly what I am. You just needed me to be smaller." Kaylor left without ceremony, and she watched him go with neither satisfaction nor regret. He was a chapter that had closed, not with violence, but with the simple truth that some people can't love what they can't control. And she had never needed his love, only her own. Elder Morvek found her an hour later, watching the sun climb higher. "The other packs are asking questions. A sovereign Omega who rules without dominance. They don't know what to make of you." "Good," Aelthra said. "Let them wonder. Let them question whether the old ways are the only ways." She turned to face him fully. "Authority built on autonomy doesn't crumble when challenged. It grows." The old wolf smiled. "Your mother would be proud." The words landed soft as snow, sharp as steel. Aelthra walked forward, barefoot on stone that had drunk the blood of wolves who believed submission was survival, through a courtyard where Omegas now laughed aloud, past training grounds where strength was being redefined one choice at a time. Her silver wolf hummed contentment in her chest, ancient and patient and utterly at peace. She had spent 23 winters being told she was broken because she wouldn't shift, weak because she wouldn't fight, nothing because she refused to shrink herself into something manageable. But she had never been weak. She had been waiting for the moment when the world was ready to see that true sovereignty wasn't taken. It was recognized. That leadership wasn't about making others kneel. It was about teaching them to stand. She was never weak. She was waiting. Want more dark romance stories where power shifts and sovereignty is earned? Subscribe to Midnight Stories for weekly chapters that explore forbidden attraction, psychological complexity, and the transformative journey from survival to sovereignty. New episodes every Tuesday. Comment below. What would you do if you discovered a power the world told you didn't exist?